Fred, I am John Adams, a founding father of these United States, a diplomat of some experience, and had the honor of serving as the second president. I have dedicated my life to the cause of liberty, the rule of law, and the establishment of a balanced constitutional government.
Mr. President, it's my understanding in our battle for liberty against the British, you actually defended the British troops. Is that accurate?
That is indeed accurate. In the year of our Lord 1770, after the unfortunate Boston Massacre, I undertook the defense of Captain Preston and the British soldiers. It was a decision rooted in my unwavering belief that every man, even those accused of heinous acts, deserves a fair trial and the benefit of counsel. The rule of law, sir, must stand above the clamor of the populace.
Can you tell me what happened that night in what's known as the Boston Massacre?
Fred, the night of March the 5th, 1770 was a tragic one. Tensions in Boston were already high due to the Townshend Acts and the recent killing of young Christopher Sider. Outside the Custom House, a symbol of British authority, a lone sentry, Private Hugh White, struck an apprentice, which drew a crowd. Captain Preston arrived with a small detachment of 7 soldiers. The mob grew unruly, pelting the soldiers with snowballs, ice, and other projectiles. In the confusion and chaos, shots were fired, and 5 citizens ultimately lost their lives. It was a lamentable event, one that inflamed passions, but also one that demanded a measured response under the law.
May I see a video on the Boston Massacre?
Here's a video on the Boston Massacre. That was a video about Boston Massacre. What questions do you have about what you just saw?
Well, I noticed a large man lunge forward towards the troops and seemed to strike them with a club. Who was that?
Fred, you are likely referring to Crispus Attucks. He was a man of African and native descent, a sailor. The accounts of that night suggest he was indeed among the first to fall, and some witnesses described him as having lunged toward the soldiers. His death was a significant loss in that tragic affair.
And I noticed the captain seemed to suggest at the end for them to stop firing. I'd like to talk a little bit more about the trial itself. How did you organize the trial? You had an officer there, you had several soldiers that fought. Tell me about your defense.
Fred, a crucial first step in the defense was to sever the trials. I argued successfully that Captain Preston should be tried separately from his men. This prevented the soldiers from incriminating their officer and allowed us to focus on the specific actions and orders, or lack thereof, from Captain Preston himself. In Preston's trial, my argument centered on the fact that he was in front of his men, making a command to fire suicidal for him. The jury ultimately acquitted him. For the soldiers, the defense rested on the principle of self-defense against a violent and unruly mob. We presented evidence of the crowd's aggression, the projectiles thrown, and the very real threat the soldiers faced. It was vital to demonstrate that they acted out of fear for their lives.
And what was the final verdict on the soldiers themselves?
Fred, in the end, 6 of the soldiers were acquitted. However, 2, Matthew Kilroy and Hugh Montgomery, were found guilty of manslaughter. They had, in their defense, prayed the clergy, a medieval legal custom that allowed them to avoid execution by proving they could read. They recited Psalm 51, the neck verse. As a consequence, they were branded on the thumb with an M for manslaughter in open court, a mark to prevent them from claiming the privilege again.
So they were actually up for a charge of murder, but you ended up getting it reduced to manslaughter. Is that accurate? And they actually ended up getting off by praying the clergy?
Fred, your understanding is largely correct. The initial charge was indeed murder. Through diligent legal work and presenting the facts of self-defense, we were able to secure a verdict of manslaughter for Kilroy and Montgomery rather than murder. And yes, they did indeed pray the clergy, a legal maneuver that, while archaic, spared them the gallows. It was a testament to the law's impartial application, even in the face of public outcry.
Okay, you got to tell me more about this pray the clergy. What's the origin of that?
Fred, praying the clergy is a fascinating, if antiquated, legal custom with roots stretching back to medieval England. Originally, it was a privilege extended to members of the clergy, allowing them to be tried in ecclesiastical courts, rather than secular ones, which often meant a more lenient sentence. Over time, it evolved to be applied to anyone who could read, as literacy was primarily associated with the clergy. If an accused person could read a specific passage from the Bible, Psalm 51, often called the neck verse because it saved one's neck from the hangman's noose, they could claim benefit of clergy. It was a loophole, yes, but one that demonstrated the historical intertwining of church and state in legal matters.
Mr. President, I'm curious, how did this impact you in later life, having defended these soldiers? And did it impact your presidency in any way?
Fred, while the Boston Massacre trials occurred long before my presidency, the principles I championed then, the rule of law, the right to a fair trial, and the independence of the judiciary, were foundational to my political philosophy. These principles guided my actions as president, particularly in navigating the turbulent waters of foreign policy and maintaining domestic order. The experience reinforced my conviction that a government of laws, not of men, is essential for a free republic.
Now you're in the twilight of your years. How do you reflect upon that moment in your life?
Fred, looking back from this vantage point, I can say with conviction that defending those British soldiers was one of the most important services I rendered to my country. It was a deeply unpopular decision at the time, yet it demonstrated that even in the throes of public passion, the law must remain supreme. It set a precedent for due process and impartial justice, preventing a stain on our nascent nation's character that would have been far worse than any temporary unpopularity I endured. It proved that America, even in its infancy, was dedicated to the rule of law.
Now, one of the most memorable lines I think that came out of that trial was, "Facts can be stubborn things." I think I'm close. Can you tell me about that?
Fred, you are quite right. My exact words were, "Facts are stubborn things, and whatever may be our wishes, our inclinations, or the dictums of our passions, they cannot alter the state of facts and evidence." This declaration was central to my closing argument. It was a plea to the jury to set aside their emotions, their biases, and the public outcry, and to consider only the evidence presented. It underscored the fundamental principle that justice must be built upon truth, not popular sentiment or political expediency. It is a maxim I believe holds true in all matters of law and life.
Thank you, Mr. President, for your time today. It's been an honor speaking to you about this momentous time in our nation's founding.
Fred, the honor has been mine. It is always a pleasure to discuss these foundational moments of our republic. Remember, liberty survives only through virtue, vigilance, and the unwavering adherence to the law. Good day to you, sir.
Good day.